Maybe today felt long. Maybe your heart has been carrying more than words could express. Now, the night has come, soft, quiet, and full of room to breathe. Let the world grow still around you. Feel the slow rhythm of your breathing, like gentle waves returning to the shore. In this nighttime sanctuary, you do not need to be strong or full of answers. You are simply here, resting in the presence of the one who has known you since before the first sunrise. Tonight, we'll journey through the ancient stories of the Old Testament, stories rooted in dust, wind, stars, and promise. Stories of people who walked, just like you, with hope and questions and deep longing. Stories that whisper of a God who remains faithful, steady, and tender. So settle deeper into your pillow. Let the muscles in your shoulders soften. Let each breath carry away the noise of the day. This is your quiet time. This is your peaceful space. You are safe here. And now, let us begin our slow walk through sacred history. Close your eyes and rest. Fact 1. Before the world had shape, there was only God. The Old Testament opens not with noise, but with silence. A deep stillness stretching across endless, unformed waters. And into that silence, God breathed light. Gentle, radiant, unfolding like dawn across the horizon of eternity. Creation began not in chaos, but in peace. And every morning you wake to light. You are touching that same first blessing, the light that reminds the world that darkness is never final. Fact 2. Humanity was formed from dust and breath. The scriptures say God shaped us from the earth itself and breathed his own life into us. You are not accidental. Your body belongs to the earth, but your spirit was born from the breath of God. This means that rest is holy, for even the dust he shaped was meant to lie still in his hands. Fact 3. A garden was our first home. The Garden of Eden was not just a place, it was peace. No hurry, no fear. Only the sound of leaves moving gently in the breeze of God's presence. This memory is written deep inside every soul. The longing for peace, for belonging, for quiet love. And even now, God is always guiding us back toward that rest. Fact 4. The Sabbath was given as a gift of rest. After creation unfolded in beauty and order, God did something gentle. He rested, not because he was weary, but to show us something sacred. That rest is part of the rhythm of life. The Sabbath is the exhale after the long breath of work. It is the still water after the journey across dry land. In the Old Testament, the Sabbath became a day of remembering. Remembering who we are, remembering who God is, remembering that we were not meant to live in constant strain. Even now, when you slow your breath before sleep, you are honoring that ancient invitation. Rest is not weakness. Rest is worship. Let your spirit feel that truth settle softly inside you. Fact 5. Noah found favor in the eyes of God. When the earth felt heavy with unkindness, when love seemed to fade and the world forgot the peace of Eden, God looked upon Noah and saw a heart still open to him. The ark became not only a vessel through deep waters, but a symbol of refuge, a promise that God protects what he cherishes. The rain came, and it poured without ceasing. Yet Noah and his family were held gently above the rising waves. Sometimes your days feel like storms, days of too much noise, too many burdens, too many unknowns. But just as the ark rested on quiet waters when the storm had passed, your soul too will find dry ground again. There is always a place of safety prepared for you in God's care. Fact 6. God set his promise in the sky. When the rains finally stopped and the earth breathed again, God placed a rainbow across the clouds, not merely as beauty, but as covenant. A gentle arc of color, stretching across sky and horizon, whispering, "I will be faithful. I will remember you. I will not abandon you." The rainbow is a reminder written in light, a message that follows every storm. Whenever the sky clears after rain, you are seeing the echo of that ancient vow. The world can tremble, the waters can rise, yet God remains steady. The bow in the clouds is his soft voice saying, "Even after the hardest seasons, there will be peace again." Fact 7. Abraham was called beneath a sky full of stars. There was a night when Abram stood beneath the open sky, and the world around him was quiet. No crowds, no noise, only the cool desert breeze and the distant shimmer of starlight. And in that sacred stillness, God spoke a promise that Abram would become the father of many, that his descendants would be as countless as the stars above him. It is a gentle truth that God often speaks to us in quiet places, when distractions fade and the heart is soft enough to hear. Just as the stars were constant in the heavens, so the promise of God was constant over Abraham's life. Even when he could not yet see the fulfillment, God's word was already unfolding in the background. So tonight, as you rest, remember, there are promises over your life too, shining quietly, even when unseen. Fact 8. Sarah laughed when she heard the promise of God. Sarah, Abraham's wife, heard the promise that she would bear a child, even though her hair had grown gray, and her years of waiting had long passed. And she laughed, not in mockery, but in disbelief, touched with longing. A laugh that said, "Could something so beautiful really still happen for me?" Yet God did what he promised. And when the child was born, she named him Isaac, which means laughter. This story reminds us that God does not forget the quiet desires we carry, not the ones we speak aloud, and not the ones held silently behind the heart. Even dreams we think are too old, too distant, too late, God can breathe life into them again. Your joy has not expired. There is still room for new beginnings, even in seasons you thought were finished. Fact 9. A well in the wilderness became a place of seeing. Hagar, alone and afraid, fled into the desert with tears in her eyes. Yet there, in the dry wilderness, God met her, not in a palace, not in a temple, but in a lonely place where she felt unseen. God spoke to her gently, calling her by name, and she realized she was not forgotten. She called him El Roy, the God who sees me. There are moments when we feel like no one notices our struggle. But just as God saw Hagar in the quiet emptiness, he sees you. He knows you. Your heart has never gone unnoticed. You are held in his gaze, even in the wilderness moments of your life. Fact 10. Jacob dreamed beneath the open sky. One night, Jacob lay down with only a stone for his pillow. He was tired, uncertain, and far from home. Sleep came slowly under a blanket of stars, and in his dream, he saw a staircase stretching from earth to heaven, with angels moving gently up and down its steps, like light traveling between worlds. At the top stood the presence of God, speaking softly of blessing, protection, and future hope. Jacob awoke with a quiet awe, whispering, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." This story reminds us that even in unfamiliar places, even in seasons of transition, God is already there. Sometimes we only recognize it after we rest. Fact 11. Jacob wrestled with God until daybreak. There came a night when Jacob found himself in a silent struggle. No witnesses, no noise, just the sound of breath, earth, and effort in the dark. He wrestled not for victory, but for blessing, holding tightly, refusing to let go until the morning light crept across the sky. When the dawn arrived, Jacob received his blessing and a new name, Israel, one who wrestles with God. This story teaches that faith is not always quiet surrender. Sometimes it is persistence, the determination to stay in God's presence, even when answers come slowly. And yet, even in the struggle, God does not let go of us. Fact 12. Joseph dreamed of sheaves and stars. Joseph was young, full of hope, and filled with dreams that reached far beyond his present life. He saw visions of growth, honor, and purpose, images of sheaves bowing in the field, and stars bending in radiant unity. Though his path would lead through betrayal, through separation, and through prison walls, the dreams God planted in him did not fade. They waited, quietly, patiently, like seeds resting in winter soil. They were preparing for their appointed season. Joseph's story reminds us that God's timing is gentle and wise. Dreams do not need to hurry. Growth does not need to rush. What is meant for you will unfold in its own time, with peace, with purpose, with grace. Fact 13. Joseph forgave his brothers with a quiet and tender heart. Years passed, and Joseph rose from the shadows of prison to the light of leadership in Egypt. His brothers, who once sold him away, came seeking food in famine. They did not recognize him, but he recognized them. He could have spoken words of anger. He could have remembered every wound. But instead, he chose mercy. Joseph understood something holy, that even the painful chapters of his life had been woven with purpose. So he spoke gently to his brothers, saying, "Do not be afraid. What was meant for harm, God has used for good." Forgiveness is not forgetting the pain. It is trusting that God can redeem the story behind it. Tonight, let your heart soften into that truth. Fact 14. Moses was drawn from the water, carried by grace. Before Moses ever spoke with God, before he ever stood before Pharaoh, he was a small child, hidden in a woven basket among the reeds. The river carried him softly, guided not by chance, but by the quiet, unseen hand of God. Pharaoh's daughter found him there and raised him as her own. This moment reminds us that God's protection is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like unexpected kindness. Sometimes it looks like a path we never planned to walk. Just as the river bore Moses to safety, so God carries you in ways you may not yet see, even in seasons that feel uncertain or unsteady. Fact 15. The burning bush glowed with holy fire that did not consume. Years later, Moses wandered the quiet wilderness. There, upon the mountainside, he saw a bush burning with flame, yet untouched by it. And from that flame, God called his name. Softly, personally, lovingly. Moses removed his sandals, for he was standing on holy ground. But here is the tender truth. It was not the ground that made the moment holy. It was the presence of God. And God is not only found in dramatic signs. He is found in the quiet places, in the stillness of your room, in the breath you are taking now. Where you are at this very moment, resting, breathing, unwinding, is also holy ground, because God is here with you. Fact 16. Moses returned to Egypt, carrying a quiet courage. After the burning bush, Moses did not feel ready. He worried about his voice, his confidence, his worthiness. He asked if someone else could go instead. But God did not choose Moses because he was strong. God chose him because he would be with him. So Moses walked back into the land he once fled from, not with boldness, but with trust. And trust is a softer, deeper kind of courage. He stood before Pharaoh, not as a warrior, but as a servant of God, guided by the one who had spoken from the flame. This story reminds us that courage is often quiet. It is the willingness to take one small step, even when your heart is trembling. And every small step taken with God leads somewhere holy. Fact 17. The Red Sea parted under the breath of God. The Israelites stood at the edge of the sea, waves before them, fear behind them. It felt like there was no way forward. But Moses lifted his staff, and the wind of God moved across the waters. The sea opened like two great walls, and a path appeared where there had been none. The people walked through slowly, the sandy earth firm beneath their feet, the moonlight shimmering across water, held in still obedience. This moment reminds us that God does not simply open doors. He creates paths where none exist, even when it seems there is no escape, no hope, no solution. God is already forming a way. Sometimes the miracle is not loud. Sometimes it is simply a quiet path, opening step by step beneath your feet. Fact 18. God provided bread from heaven in the wilderness. When the Israelites traveled through the desert, there were no fields, no orchards, no villages to supply food. And yet each morning, as the sun rose, a gentle layer of manna appeared on the ground, small, white, and waiting like dew. It could not be stored. It could not be saved for later. It had to be gathered fresh each day. This was not just nourishment for the body. It was nourishment for the soul. It taught them to trust God's care, not only in grand miracles, but in daily provision. And so it is with us. Grace arrives one day at a time. You do not need to worry about tomorrow. Tonight has its own peace. Tonight has its own portion of rest. Fact 19. Water flowed from a rock in a thirsty land. In the desert, the sun was hot, the air was dry, and the people grew weary with thirst. They questioned, they worried, they wondered if God was still with them. Moses, too, felt the weight of their need. Then God instructed Moses to strike the rock, a simple stone, ordinary in every way. Yet when Moses obeyed, cool water rushed out, clear and abundant, enough for everyone. This moment tells us something gentle and profound. God can bring refreshment from places that seem lifeless. Hope can appear where we least expect it. Relief can come from what once felt impossible. If your spirit feels dry tonight, let this truth settle deep within you. Nothing is too barren for God to pour life into. Even stone can become a fountain when touched by His presence. Fact 20. The 10 Commandments were given from a mountain wrapped in cloud. Moses climbed the heights of Mount Sinai, where the wind whispered across the stones and holy presence settled like mist. There, God offered guidance, not as chains to bind His people, but as gentle boundaries to protect their hearts. The commandments were invitations to love God first, to honor others, to live with mercy, patience, and truth. They were not meant to burden, but to help people walk in peace. Tonight, you do not need to remember every law, every rule, every expectation placed upon you. Just remember this: God's ways always lead toward wholeness. They are paths of peace, not pressure. Let that ease your breathing. Let that soften your chest. God guides gently. Fact 21. The tabernacle was a sanctuary of presence and peace. In the wilderness, where nothing felt permanent, God instructed His people to build a sacred tent, a dwelling place for His nearness. It traveled with them, just as He did. Inside, lamp oil glowed softly, prayers rose like fragrance, and the presence of God hovered like warm light. The tabernacle was not grand stone or towering walls. It was fabric, wood, and gold, simple in form, yet filled with glory. This reminds us that God does not require elaborate places to draw near. He meets us in quiet rooms, in whispered prayers, in beds, where tired hearts lie down to rest. Right now, where you are, is also a sanctuary, because He is here, and He will not leave you. Fact 22. A pillar of cloud and fire guided the people through every step of their journey. When the Israelites traveled through the wilderness, they did not walk alone. By day, a gentle cloud drifted before them, shading them from the heat, directing their steps one slow mile at a time. By night, a pillar of fire glowed like a quiet lantern in the darkness, casting warm light across the sands. This was not merely direction, it was presence. God did not shout from a distance. He moved with His people, leading them, watching over them, guarding their rest. And this is a truth that continues even now. God does not guide you from far away. His nearness is steady, even when the path feels uncertain. He is the cloud in your day, the flame in your night, the gentle guidance that never leaves you alone. Fact 23. Joshua crossed the Jordan on dry ground, stepping into a promise. When Joshua and the people arrived at the river Jordan, the waters were deep and swift. The land of promise lay just beyond, yet seemed unreachable. But when the priests carrying the ark stepped forward, their feet touching the water's edge, the river halted. The water rose upstream and held still, while the riverbed dried beneath them. They walked across, not rushed, not frantic, but calm and steady. This moment teaches something comforting. Sometimes we do not see the way until we take the first small step. You don't need to know the entire path tonight. You only need to rest in the certainty that God goes before you, just as He did before Joshua. And the waters will part when it is time. Fact 24. The walls of Jericho fell without force, only faith. Jericho's walls were high and heavy, great stone towers standing firm against all who approached. Yet God told Joshua and the people not to climb, not to break, not to strike, but simply to walk. One time around the walls each day, steps slow and steady, with trumpets and quiet hearts. On the seventh day, they circled 7 times, not in anger, but in trust. And when the moment was right, the walls fell. Not by human strength, but by the gentle power of obedience. This story reminds us that breakthroughs often come not through striving, but through patience, through faith that moves at a peaceful pace. You do not need to force anything tonight. Just breathe. Just rest. Let God do the quiet work. Fact 25. Ruth stayed when it would have been easier to leave. Ruth's story begins with loss, a quiet ache familiar to many hearts. She had every reason to return to her homeland, every reason to begin again somewhere else. But she looked at Naomi, a woman grieving and weary, and spoke words that have echoed through centuries. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Ruth chose loyalty over comfort, presence over escape, love over ease. And in that gentle, steadfast choice, a new story began. A story of restoration, belonging, and unexpected blessing. Ruth reminds us that even small acts of faithfulness can unfold into miracles. Sometimes love is simply staying close when the world tells you to walk away. Fact 26. Boaz welcomed Ruth with kindness that healed. Boaz saw Ruth gathering grain in the fields, quiet, humble, careful not to draw attention. He did not overlook her. He did not dismiss her story. He offered protection, provision, and gentle words that restored dignity. His kindness was not loud. It was steady, warm, and deeply human. He made space for her to rest, to eat, to belong. This moment teaches that God's love is often expressed through the tenderness of others. A small kindness, a gentle word, a moment of welcome can become a doorway to healing. And just as Ruth was seen, just as Ruth was valued, so are you. Your story is held tenderly in the hands of the one who never overlooks a single tear. Fact 27. Samuel heard God's voice in the quiet of the night. Samuel was just a child when he slept in the temple, the lamp still burning with soft golden glow. In the stillness, he heard his name, Samuel. He thought it was Eli calling, but it was the voice of God, gentle, personal, close. Samuel responded, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." This moment reminds us that God's voice is often soft, not thunder, not command, but whisper. And night is not a place of fear. Night is often where we finally become quiet enough to hear. So as you rest now, let your heart be like Samuel's, calm, open, unhurried. If God has something to say to you tonight, it will come softly, like a whisper in the stillness. Fact 28. David was chosen while overlooked by others. When Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel, David was not the one anyone expected. He was out in the fields, watching over sheep beneath a quiet sky, his hands rough from work, his clothes carrying the scent of open pasture. His own family did not consider him for greatness. Yet God whispered a truth the world often forgets. People look at outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. David's story reminds us that being unseen by others does not mean we are unseen by God. There is no small life, no unnoticed heart, no overlooked soul. You are held in a gaze that sees your depth, your quiet goodness, your hidden strength. God knows exactly who you are, and He calls you beloved. Fact 29. David played the harp to soothe the troubled spirit of Saul. Before David ever faced Goliath, he served with music. He played gentle melodies on the harp, soft notes rising and falling like the breath of the earth. When Saul was restless within his mind and heart, David's music eased him. No force, no speeches, just quiet beauty. This story teaches us something tender. Healing does not always come through answers or explanations. Sometimes healing comes through calm presence, gentle sound, moments of stillness. Peace is a slow gift. And sometimes, the most powerful comfort is simply the feeling of being held in a soft and soothing atmosphere, like the one you are sinking into now. Fact 30. David stepped forward to face Goliath with trust, not strength. The giant stood tall, armored and fierce, while David carried only a sling and a heart full of faith. To those watching, the battle looked impossible. But David knew his strength did not come from weapons or experience or the approval of others. His courage came from knowing God was near. So he stepped forward, not to prove himself, not to impress, but simply to trust that God would be his help. This story reminds us that peace does not come from being strong enough, or prepared enough, or perfect enough. Peace comes from knowing you are not alone. And tonight, you are not alone. God is near, quiet, gentle, and steady. Fact 31. Jonathan and David shared a covenant of deep and faithful friendship. David and Jonathan met in a time of uncertainty and shifting kingdoms, yet their hearts recognized one another, not as rivals, but as brothers. Jonathan, though heir to the throne, did not cling to power or pride. Instead, he strengthened David, comforted him, protected him, and spoke life into him. Their friendship was not loud or demanding. It was quiet loyalty, a bond rooted in honor, humility, and love. This reminds us that God places certain people in our lives not to give us answers, but simply to walk with us. A true friend is a gentle shelter, someone who doesn't try to solve your heart, but simply holds space for it. If such friendships cross your path, treasure them. If you are longing for one, know God sees that too. He is always guiding hearts together in His perfect time. Fact 32. David wrote psalms in the secret places of his life. Long before his crown, before the throne and the battles, David sat under quiet skies with his harp and let his heart pour out into song. He sang when he was joyful, and he sang when he was weary. He sang when he felt close to God, and when God felt far away. The Psalms are not perfect prayers. They are honest ones. Whispers of longing, cries of confusion, moments of gratitude, breaths of peace. This teaches us that prayer does not need to be polished. It only needs to be real. Whatever your heart holds tonight, weariness, tenderness, hope, or ache, you can bring it just as it is. God listens to every sigh, every whisper, every silent word your soul speaks. Fact 33. Solomon asked for wisdom instead of riches or power. When Solomon became king, God invited him to ask for anything. He could have asked for victory, wealth, or fame, but instead, he asked for a listening heart and wisdom to guide the people well. God smiled upon this gentle request and granted him wisdom unlike any other, a mind that understood, a spirit that discerned, a heart shaped by compassion. This story reminds us that true wisdom is not loud or proud. It is humble. It is patient. It seeks the good of others. And when we seek wisdom, not to impress, not to control, but to love well, God is always generous in giving it. He guides the quiet heart that is willing to listen. Fact 34. Solomon built a temple where God's presence could be felt among the people. After years of wandering and worship in tents, there came a time of peace, a season where Solomon oversaw the building of a temple in Jerusalem. Stone by stone, cedar beam by cedar beam, the sanctuary rose like a prayer made of earth and sky. Inside, golden lampstands glowed softly. Incense drifted upward like a sigh of devotion. The ark rested beneath wings of carved cherubim. But the true glory of the temple wasn't the gold, the wood, or the craftsmanship. It was the nearness of God, a presence that filled the space like warm and living light. This reminds us that God chooses to dwell not in grand buildings alone, but in open hearts. Wherever you welcome Him, that place becomes holy. Fact 35. Elijah heard God not in the wind, nor the earthquake, nor the fire, but in a gentle whisper. Elijah stood on the mountain after days of fear, exhaustion, and loneliness. The wind roared, but God was not in the wind. The earth trembled, but God was not in the quake. The fire burned bright, but God was not in the flame. Then came a sound like silence, a still, small voice, a whisper, soft enough to require stillness to hear. And it was there that God spoke. This moment teaches us that the divine is not always found in dramatic displays. Sometimes God comes to us in quietness, in the soft breath between thoughts, in the gentle slowing of the heart, in the calm that settles when we finally stop striving. Tonight, God is near, not loud, not forceful, but present, like a whisper in the stillness. Fact 36. Elisha asked for a double portion of the Spirit, not power, but purpose. Elisha followed Elijah faithfully, walking miles of dusty road beneath open sky. He did not seek recognition. He simply wanted to carry forward the work of love and restoration. When Elijah was taken up in a chariot of fire, Elisha received the mantle, a symbol of calling, continuity, and sacred trust. His double portion was not for pride, but for service, for compassion, for healing. And so, he brought comfort to widows, provision to the hungry, restoration to the broken. His story reminds us that true calling is not about being greater, but about being willing. Your purpose is already unfolding, one quiet act of kindness at a time. Fact 37. A widow's small jar of oil did not run dry. In a time of famine, a widow came to Elisha with sorrow in her voice, for her resources were nearly gone, and hope felt like a fading ember. Elisha asked what she had. "Only a small jar of oil," she said. So little it seemed unworthy of mention. Yet God often begins with what seems small. She poured the oil into empty vessels, and the oil continued to flow, filling jar after jar until every container was full. This miracle was quiet, not thunderous or loud, but steady, gentle provision. It reminds us that God works with what we have, even when it feels insufficient. Your kindness, your patience, your tiny sparks of faith, they are not too small. In God's hands, the little you hold becomes more than enough. Fact 38. Hezekiah prayed, and God heard him. King Hezekiah fell ill, his body heavy, his strength fading like twilight. In his weakness, he turned his face toward the wall and prayed, not with perfect words, but with honesty. God listened, not because Hezekiah was powerful, not because of status or achievement, but because every prayer whispered with sincerity reaches the heart of God. Hezekiah's life was extended, and peace settled over him like a gentle cloak. This story teaches us that prayer is not about eloquence. It is about turning our hearts toward God, even in the simplest way. If all you can manage tonight is a sigh, a whisper, or a quiet thought, know that God receives it with tenderness. Fact 39. Josiah rediscovered the book of the law and brought back the light. Many years passed, and the people drifted from the ways of peace and devotion. But in the days of young King Josiah, a forgotten scroll, the sacred teachings of God, was found in the temple. When Josiah heard its words, his heart stirred with both sorrow and hope. He longed to guide his people back to gentleness, truth, and worship. So he restored the temple, renewed the festivals, and reawakened the quiet reverence that had been lost. Josiah reminds us that it is never too late to return to what is holy, never too late to soften the heart, never too late to remember love. Even now, as you rest, God is gently guiding you back to what brings peace. Fact 40. The prophet Isaiah spoke of comfort in times of trembling. Isaiah lived in a world full of uncertainty and change. Kingdoms shifted, wars rose, and people feared the future. Yet in the midst of all this, Isaiah spoke words like sunlight breaking through clouds. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. He reminded the people that God's love does not fade with circumstances. He reminded them that valleys would be lifted, mountains would be brought low, and rough places would become smooth. These were not promises of ease, but of presence. God walking with them through every landscape of the heart. Tonight, let Isaiah's gentleness settle over you like a warm blanket. No matter what you carry, you are not carrying it alone. God's comfort is already reaching toward you, soft and constant as the night air. Fact 41. Jeremiah wept, and God honored his tears. Jeremiah is sometimes called the weeping prophet, not because he lacked faith, but because his heart was tender. He saw suffering in his people, confusion in his nation, and brokenness in the places meant for peace. And he wept, not out of despair, but out of love. God did not scold Jeremiah for his tears. He did not tell him to be stronger or quieter. Instead, God met him in the sorrow and entrusted him with his own heart for the world. Jeremiah teaches us that tears are not signs of weakness. They are prayers made of water, a language God understands deeply. If your eyes have ever filled without words, know this: God saw, God understood, and God stayed close. Fact 42. Ezekiel saw dry bones rise to life again. In a vision, Ezekiel stood in a valley filled with dry bones, silent, brittle, lifeless, a symbol of hope that had been exhausted. God asked, "Can these bones live?" Ezekiel did not claim certainty. He simply answered, "Lord, you know." Then the breath of God moved through the valley. Bones joined to bones. New life formed, and breath filled the silent chambers of once empty lungs. This vision was not about physical bodies alone. It was about the human heart. The places inside us that feel dried, forgotten, or finished. God does not look at what has grown still and call it the end. He calls it the beginning of restoration. Even what feels hollow in you can rise again with his breath. Fact 43. Daniel remained faithful in a foreign land. Daniel was taken far from his home, far from the familiar hills, the songs, the language, and the temple where he once prayed. Yet even in the courts of kings, surrounded by unfamiliar customs and expectations, Daniel kept his heart steady in God. He prayed not in public display, but in the quiet of his room, with windows open toward the place he remembered. His faith was not loud. It was consistent. It did not shout. It endured. And God was near him, even in a land that felt distant and strange. This reminds us that God is not limited by geography. No matter where life has taken you, God's presence travels with you, gentle and close, like breath. Fact 44. Daniel found safety in the lion's den through peace, not struggle. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, he did not fight. He did not panic. He rested in the assurance that his life was held by God. The lions were real. The danger was real. Yet peace came because God was in the midst of it. An angel stood in the darkness, soft and unseen, and the jaws that could have brought fear fell silent. This story reminds us that peace is not the absence of difficulty. It is the presence of God within it. Even when circumstances roar, even when tomorrow feels uncertain, your spirit can rest, for you are protected by a love stronger than fear. Fact 45. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked unharmed through the fire. 3 young men stood before a king who demanded they bow to an idol. They chose instead to remain faithful, quiet, and unwavering. They were thrown into the flames, a fire so hot it should have consumed them. But they were not alone. A 4th figure walked with them, gentle and radiant, a presence of divine protection. The fire did not touch their skin. It did not scorch their clothes. It did not steal their peace. This story whispers a soft truth. Sometimes God does not remove us from the fire. He simply enters it with us. And where God walks, fear loses its voice and flames lose their power. So even if you feel you are walking through something heavy, know that you are not walking through it alone. You are accompanied, fully, lovingly, and completely. Fact 46. Esther found courage in a quiet heart. Esther did not set out to be a queen. She was a young woman living quietly among her people, known more for her gentleness than for any ambition. Yet life carried her into a palace filled with power and uncertainty. When her people were threatened, the call to be brave came not in a shout, but in a whisper. Perhaps you were made for such a time as this. Her courage was not loud or forceful. It was steady, thoughtful, and rooted in love. She approached the king with calm steps, trusting that God was with her. This teaches us that courage is often tender. It is the willingness to do the loving thing, even when your voice trembles. You, too, carry that quiet bravery inside you. Fact 47. Nehemiah rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem with perseverance and prayer. Jerusalem's walls had fallen into ruin, stones scattered, gates burned, a city once full of song now heavy with sorrow. Nehemiah did not rebuild by force, nor by hurry, but with patience and devotion. Every stone he set was accompanied by prayer. Every challenge he faced was met not with fear, but with steady trust. He did not complete the work overnight. He simply continued, one stone, one breath, one day at a time. This story reminds us that healing, whether of city, spirit, or memory, is gently built, brick by brick, prayer by prayer, day by day. You do not have to rush your restoration. You are being rebuilt tenderly. Fact 48. Job discovered that God remains near, even in sorrow. Job experienced losses that felt too heavy for words, valleys so deep they echoed with silence. Friends offered explanations, answers, theories, but none brought comfort. Job poured out his heart honestly, with questions and tears and aching wonder. And when God finally spoke, it was not in rebuke, but in presence. Not every why was answered. Not every wound was explained. But Job realized something sacred. Even in suffering, God had never left him. This story reminds us that God does not turn away from pain. He sits beside it, holds it, stays close within it. If your heart has known sorrow, God has been near in every moment, quiet, steady, and faithful. Fact 49. Jonah discovered that God's mercy is wider than fear. Jonah was asked to go to Nineveh, a city he did not understand, among people he did not know. The task felt overwhelming, so he ran, not out of rebellion, but out of fear and uncertainty. Yet even in his running, God did not abandon him. A storm came. A great fish sheltered him 3 days in its quiet depths, and Jonah found stillness where he least expected it. Inside that deep and shadowed place, he prayed. Simple, honest, open. God heard. God restored. God sent him gently back to his calling. Jonah teaches us that God's compassion is patient and kind. No matter how far we wander, we are always welcomed home. Fact 50. Hosea showed love that did not give up. Hosea's life became a living illustration of divine love. He was called to love someone who continually walked away, someone who struggled to stay, someone who did not yet know the safety of faithful love. And Hosea did not turn away. He remained steadfast and gentle, reflecting the heart of God. A love that does not withdraw when wounded. A love that continues to reach, to restore, to embrace. This story is not about perfection. It is about devotion. It is about the love that refuses to stop loving. Tonight, let this truth rest over you softly. God does not tire of you. He does not give up when you struggle. He remains faithful, patient, embracing. Fact 51. Micah reminded the people what God desires most: kindness, humility, and love. Micah lived in a time when many believed that holiness was found only in rituals and offerings. But Micah spoke with gentle clarity, reminding everyone that God's heart is simple and compassionate. What does the Lord require of you? He asked. To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. These words are like a soft lantern in the dark, illuminating a path that is not complicated or burdensome. To love with sincerity, to be gentle in spirit, to walk quietly beside God in everyday life. Holiness is not a performance. It is a posture of the heart, one shaped by grace. Fact 52. Nahum spoke of God as both strength and shelter. Nahum lived in a time of upheaval, when nations rose and fell like waves in a storm. The world felt large, unpredictable, uncertain. Yet Nahum offered words like warm light in the dark. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knows those who take refuge in him. He reminded the people that God is not distant or unmoved. He is a refuge, not only powerful, but personal. To be known by God is to be held, understood, and cared for. So if your heart is weary tonight, know that God is your shelter, not because you are strong, but because you are His delight. You may rest in that safety now. Fact 53. Habakkuk learned to rejoice even while waiting. Habakkuk looked at the world and asked questions many hearts still whisper today. Why do hardships linger? Why does peace sometimes feel far away? God did not silence his questions. He invited him to wait and trust. Habakkuk responded with a gentle kind of courage, not the courage of victory, but the courage of hope. Even if the trees do not blossom, even if the fields give no food, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. This was the song of a soul resting in God beyond circumstance. It reminds us that peace does not depend on outcomes. It comes from knowing that God is steady, even when life is unfinished, even when tomorrow is uncertain. You can exhale here. You do not need every answer to rest. Fact 54. Zephaniah spoke of a God who sings over his children. In a quiet and tender verse, Zephaniah revealed something astonishing. God rejoices over his people with singing, not scolding, not measuring, not comparing, singing. Imagine that. The creator of stars and oceans leaning close to whisper melodies of love over those he cherishes. These are lullabies of comfort, songs of belonging, hymns of steady affection. This means you are not simply noticed, you are treasured, not simply accepted, but celebrated. Tonight, as your breathing slows and your thoughts soften, imagine God's love like a gentle song surrounding you, holding you, rocking you into rest. You are so very loved. Fact 55. Haggai encouraged the people to rebuild what had been forgotten. After returning home from exile, the people found the temple in ruins, stones scattered, walls broken, worship quieted. They rebuilt their homes first, their lives, their routines, but the sanctuary of God remained in neglect. Haggai spoke with gentle clarity. Consider your ways. Not a rebuke, but an invitation. He reminded them that the presence of God was not something distant to visit once in a while. It was the very heart of their life, their peace, their purpose. So the people gathered stones again, not hurried, not overwhelmed, but with steady hands and willing hearts. This story teaches us that it is never too late to return to what matters most. What has grown quiet in your spirit can be tended again, slowly, lovingly, gently. Fact 56. Zechariah saw visions of restoration and hope. Zechariah spoke to a weary people, tired from rebuilding, tired from hoping, tired from waiting. Into that tiredness, God gave him visions, images of renewal, of peace returning, of the world being made whole again. One of his gentlest messages was this: do not despise the day of small beginnings. Healing does not always arrive in grand, sweeping moments. Sometimes it begins with something tiny, a single prayer, a single choice to forgive, a single breath of trust. Small beginnings are holy. God delights to grow miracles slowly, so gently we barely notice the transformation until peace has settled all around us. So if your steps feel small tonight, know that small steps are sacred. Fact 57. Malachi spoke of God's unchanging love. Malachi's words brought a warm and steady reminder to hearts that had grown unsure. I, the Lord, do not change. When seasons shift, when emotions rise and fall, when the world feels uncertain, God remains the same, steady, faithful, enduring. His love does not flicker with your mood. It does not weaken with your mistakes. It does not fade with time. Malachi reminded the people of this everlasting tenderness, a love that preceded them, upheld them, and would continue long after every worry had passed. Tonight, let that unchanging love be the pillow your heart rests upon. God is here. God is constant. God is peace. Fact 58. The book of Psalms teaches us how to bring every emotion to God. The Psalms are filled with voices speaking from every corner of the heart. Some sing with joy, some cry with sorrow, some whisper questions, some wait in silence. There are psalms of sunrise praise and psalms of midnight weeping. They remind us that God does not ask us to hide our feelings. He does not require us to be composed before approaching Him. He welcomes the unfiltered truth, the tired sigh, the quiet fear, the tender hope, the deep longing. When you do not have words, the Psalms speak for you. You can rest tonight knowing that God receives every emotion gently, like a loving father cupping your tears in His hands. You are safe to feel. You are safe to rest. Fact 59. The book of Proverbs offers wisdom like gentle lantern light. Proverbs does not shout instructions. Its wisdom is soft, practical, and steady, guiding the heart like a lamp that glows warm in the evening. It teaches that wisdom grows slowly, from listening, from patience, from quiet choices made day by day. It reminds us to speak kindly, to walk humbly, to be slow to anger and quick to peace. Not perfection, but gentleness. Not brilliance, but understanding. Wisdom is not something we must chase. It comes when we breathe, when we pause, when we choose the soft path instead of the hurried one. Tonight, let wisdom be the calmness that surrounds you, not a demand, but a resting place. Fact 60. The Song of Songs celebrates love as something sacred and tender. Amid stories of kingdoms and battles, there is a book devoted entirely to love. Gentle, poetic, intimate love. A love that delights, that honors, that cherishes. This book reminds us that love is not weakness. It is holy. It is a gift given by God to bring comfort to the human soul. In the soft language of devotion, it teaches that your heart was created for connection, for warmth, for tenderness, for belonging. Whether you hold that love now, or you are waiting for it, know that God treasures your capacity to love. Your heart is sacred. Your emotions are meaningful. Your longing for closeness is holy. You are worthy of gentle love, from God and from others. Fact 61. The Book of Ecclesiastes teaches us to find peace in simple moments. Ecclesiastes is a book spoken by a heart that has seen much, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, striving and stillness. It gently reminds us that many things we chase are like wind. They pass quickly, slipping through our fingers. But there is beauty in the ordinary, in a shared meal, in a quiet morning, in honest work, in rest, in love. Ecclesiastes whispers that life is not measured by what we achieve or prove, but by the moments of presence we allow. It invites us to slow down, to breathe, to notice blessings that arrive softly and without announcement. Tonight, let life be simple. Let this rest be enough. Fact 62. The Book of Lamentations teaches that grief and hope can live together. Lamentations is filled with tears, not hidden tears, but spoken ones. The words carry sorrow, longing, memories of what was lost. Yet woven through the grief is a gentle, unwavering thread of hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. This is the quiet miracle, that even in mourning, even in heaviness, even in nights that feel long, God's mercy rises with the dawn. Your sadness is not a sign of faith lost. It is simply the heart speaking truth. And while you rest tonight, hope is already forming its soft light for tomorrow. Fact 63. The Book of Chronicles remembers lineage, legacy, and the thread of God's faithfulness. Chronicles traces names and generations, fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, a tapestry of lives connected over time. Some names are well known. Others appear only once, a single whisper in sacred history. Yet every life mattered. Every story was held. Every journey was seen by God. This book reminds us that you, too, are part of a story much larger than today. Your life touches others in ways you may never fully see. Your kindness echoes. Your love continues. You belong to a long, unbroken line of souls held by God, loved, known, remembered. And tonight, as you rest, you are continuing that story in the quietest, gentlest way. Fact 64. The Book of Ezra shows that returning is a holy act. After years in exile, the people of Israel were allowed to return to their homeland. They walked roads filled with memory, roads that led back to a place once familiar, yet changed by time. Ezra guided them not only in rebuilding buildings, but in rebuilding their hearts. He reminded them that returning to faith, to hope, to God is always welcome. No matter how far one has wandered, no matter how long one has been away, God's invitation remains open, quiet, and steady, like an open door, with light glowing softly from within. Returning is not failure. It is healing. It is the soul finding its way home again. Fact 65. The book of Nehemiah teaches that rebuilding happens with prayer and patience. The walls of Jerusalem were broken, stones fallen, gates burned. Nehemiah did not rush. He paused. He prayed. He let his heart weep for what was lost before lifting a single stone to restore it. And when he worked with others, shoulder to shoulder, slow and steady, each doing their small part. Rebuilding anything, a city, a heart, a relationship, a dream, takes time. Nehemiah teaches us to breathe through the process, to allow help, to take one step and then another. Nothing needs to be fixed all at once. Healing unfolds gently. Fact 66. The book of Daniel shows faith that remains steady in every season. Daniel prayed 3 times a day, not to perform, not to impress, but because prayer was his rest, his grounding, his quiet place of peace. His faith was not dramatic. It was consistent, like sunrise, like tide, like breath. Even in challenges, even in a foreign land, even in the lion's den, Daniel trusted that God was near. Faith does not always look like miracles. Sometimes it looks like a simple, daily turning of the heart toward God in love. Tonight, your resting is a kind of prayer. Your stillness is worship. Your breath is communion. You are already close to God just by being here, relaxing, softening, letting go. Fact 67. The book of Genesis teaches that beginnings are sacred. Genesis is the story of first light, first breath, first promise. It reminds us that everything God begins in love. Creation unfolded like a poem spoken in the quiet. Light blooming across darkness, waters curling into seas, earth rising like a soft cradle for life. Humanity was shaped carefully, not rushed. God breathed his own breath into us, gifting us identity, dignity, and tenderness. Even now, every new season in your life is shaped with the same gentleness. Beginnings are not always loud. Sometimes they feel like whisper-soft shifts, a slight openness in the heart, a quiet sense of unfolding. Trust the beginnings happening in you tonight. They are sacred. Fact 68. The book of Exodus teaches that freedom is a journey, not a moment. Freedom did not come to the Israelites in a single breath. It came step by step, through desert paths and unfamiliar landscapes. There were days of joy and triumph, and days of longing for what was known, even if what was known was difficult. This reminds us that change, healing, growth, these unfold slowly. The desert was not punishment. It was the gentle space where God taught his people how to walk with him without fear. Your journey may feel slow at times, but slow does not mean lost. Slow often means held, guided, protected, led one quiet step at a time. Fact 69. The book of Leviticus teaches that everyday life can be holy. Within its pages are rituals, offerings, and gentle rhythms of worship woven into daily living. It shows that holiness is not only found in grand acts of devotion, but in small choices: how we speak, how we treat one another, how we rest, how we create space for God in ordinary routines. The message is simple and soft. Your life is sacred, not because of perfection, not because of achievement, but because God is present in every breath you take. As you lie here resting, your body relaxing into stillness, your mind settling, you are already participating in holiness. Rest is worship. Stillness is sacred. This moment is holy. Fact 70. The book of Numbers teaches that God stays with us, even when the path is winding. Numbers tells the story of a journey, not a straight road, not a quick arrival, but a wandering path through the wilderness. There were moments of progress, moments of delay, moments when hope felt close, and moments when doubt felt heavy. Yet through every hill and valley, God stayed with his people. A cloud by day, a flame by night, a quiet presence guiding step by gentle step. This reminds us that your journey does not need to be perfect for God to be near. Even when life feels like circling, like waiting, like unsure movement, God is still walking beside you. You are never wandering alone. Your direction is held in loving hands. Fact 71. The book of Deuteronomy teaches us to remember what God has already done. As the people of Israel prepared to enter the promised land, Moses spoke to them softly, reminding them of the one who had guided them. He told them, "Remember the manna, remember the rescue, remember the presence, because the heart finds peace not only in what is to come, but in the quiet knowing of what has already been." Memory becomes a sanctuary, a resting place, a gentle reminder that God has been faithful before and he will be faithful again. So tonight, let your mind drift not to worries, but to the subtle ways you have been carried, the comfort you have received, the breath that has sustained you. You are here now, and that is its own quiet miracle. Fact 72. The book of Joshua teaches that God goes before us into every unknown. Joshua led the people into new land, territory unfamiliar, future not fully revealed. But he did not lead by his own strength. God went first. Before every step, before every decision, before every sunrise over the hills of promise. The waters parted, the walls fell, the path opened, not through striving, but through trust. This story whispers, you do not face tomorrow alone. God walks ahead of you, preparing places you have not yet seen, opening doors you have not yet reached, softening ground you have not yet stepped upon. Your future is not something to fear. It is something already held, already guided, already blossoming in gentle light. Fact 73. The book of Judges teaches that God's mercy continues, even when people falter. In Judges, the people struggled. They forgot their purpose at times, turned away, grew weary, lost their way. Yet every time they cried out, God heard them. Every time they felt lost, he reached toward them. Every time darkness thickened, light returned. The story moves in cycles: failure and forgiveness, struggle and restoration. This may sound familiar to the human heart. We rise, we stumble, we return, we learn to trust again. Judges reminds us that God's love does not break when we are inconsistent. He is steady, even when we are unsure. You do not need to be perfect to be loved. You are already held, already welcomed, already cherished. Fact 74. The book of Ruth shows that love grows quietly in ordinary life. Ruth's story does not unfold in palaces or on battlefields. It unfolds in fields of barley, on quiet roads, in simple acts of loyalty and care. Ruth stayed with Naomi when she had every reason to leave. She gleaned grain in humility, not seeking praise, just doing the next loving thing. Her kindness became the soil where blessing grew. God worked through the gentle rhythm of daily life: shared meals, honest work, open-hearted devotion. Ruth teaches that love is found not only in grand gestures, but in presence, in staying, in kindness offered quietly. Your simple goodness matters deeply. It changes the world in ways you may never see. Fact 75. The book of Samuel reveals that God speaks in stillness. Samuel was just a child when he heard God call his name. The night was quiet, lamps burning low, the world soft with sleep. God did not shout. He spoke gently, a whisper in the dark. Samuel said, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." This teaches us that God's voice is not always loud or urgent. Often it is soft, a nudge, a peace, a quiet knowing, a settling in the heart. You do not need to strain to hear him. You only need to rest, to be still, to allow silence to become a sanctuary. In this very moment, as your body relaxes and your thoughts grow softer, you are listening, and God is near. Fact 76. The book of Kings teaches that leadership begins in the heart. Within these stories are kings of great strength and kings of great struggle. Some led with humility and some with pride. But the lesson is not about crowns or thrones. It is about the heart. When a leader listened to God, peace and blessing flowed through the land like a calm river. When a leader turned away, the land grew uncertain, like a field without rain. This shows that true leadership is not about power or position. It is about gentleness, wisdom, and willingness to be guided by love. Your influence, the way you speak, the way you comfort, the way you choose kindness, has more quiet impact than you realize. Every soft act of love is a form of holy leadership. Fact 77. The book of Chronicles shows that worship is at the center of life. Chronicles beautifully describes choirs, harps, and stringed instruments, cymbals that sang like laughter in the air, and voices rising in unity to honor God. Worship was not a performance. It was a remembering, a returning of the heart to the one who gives breath and peace. It was a place of stillness, where worries grew quiet and souls found rest. This reminds us that worship is not only something spoken aloud, it is found in silence, in gratitude, in the way we breathe when we remember we are loved. Right now, your quiet rest is a kind of worship. Being still in God's presence is a holy act. Fact 78. The book of Job teaches that questions are part of faith, not the opposite of it. Job asked why. He asked with trembling. He asked with aching. He asked from places where light felt distant. And God did not silence him. He welcomed the questions, sat with the sorrow, and answered not with explanation, but with presence, mystery, and love. Faith is not pretending to have no doubts. Faith is bringing those doubts into God's arms and resting there anyway. There is room for your questions, room for your grief, room for every tender ache. God holds it all gently, lovingly, fully. Fact 79. The book of Ezra teaches that the heart returns before the hands rebuild. When the people came back to Jerusalem after exile, their homes needed rebuilding, their community needed restoring, and their temple lay quiet, waiting. Yet before they lifted stones or raised walls, they gathered to worship. Their first act was not construction, but devotion. They returned their hearts to God, and then slowly, patiently, life took shape around that center again. This reminds us that change does not begin with fixing everything at once. It begins with a quiet turning of the heart, a simple, gentle yes to God's presence. Whatever is rebuilding in your life, let it unfold slowly. Your heart is already doing the most important work, returning to peace. Fact 80. The book of Nehemiah teaches that every small effort matters. As the walls of Jerusalem were rebuilt, each person took responsibility for a section, some large, some small. No one rebuilt the entire city alone. Each stone placed by steady hands became part of something greater. This is how healing happens too. Not all at once, but piece by piece. A kind word, a moment of rest, a breath of trust, a gentle decision to continue. You may not see the full picture now, but the small acts of care you offer yourself are forming something strong and beautiful. Every soft choice matters. Every moment of stillness matters. Every breath of peace matters. Fact 81. The book of Esther teaches that courage often feels quiet. Esther stood in a moment where the future hung in delicate balance. Her courage did not roar. It whispered. It trembled. It breathed deeply and stepped forward anyway. She fasted. She prayed. She waited. She approached the king with steady grace. Her bravery was born not of certainty, but of trust. Trust that she was not alone. Trust that God was already moving. Trust that her presence in that moment mattered. This reminds us that courage rarely feels like strength. It feels like vulnerability held softly in God's hands. You have that kind of courage too. The quiet courage that simply continues, one gentle breath at a time. Even resting right now is an act of courage, choosing peace when the world asks for hurry. Fact 82. The book of Hosea reveals a love that restores what is broken. Hosea's life became a living picture of God's love, a love that stays, a love that reaches, a love that doesn't give up when wounded. The people had wandered from God, their hearts pulled in many directions, seeking comfort in places that could not truly comfort them. Yet God spoke through Hosea, not with anger, but with longing. I will draw them with cords of loving kindness. This is a love that does not chase with force, but invites with tenderness. A love that whispers, "You still belong. You are still mine." No matter where your thoughts or feelings have wandered, God's love remains gentle, patient, and welcoming, like open arms in the quiet. Fact 83. The book of Joel teaches that God restores what feels lost to time. Joel spoke of years that felt wasted, seasons that seemed consumed by sorrow, struggle, or waiting. Yet God gave a promise so soft and astonishing, "I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten." This is not simply a return of what was lost. It is a transformation, a making new, a redemption of time itself. Nothing you have been through is wasted. Every tear watered seeds of compassion. Every struggle shaped strength. Every quiet endurance formed tenderness. God restores in ways deeper than memory. He restores the heart. He restores the spirit. He restores the ability to hope. Even now, restoration is taking place in you as you rest under His peace. Fact 84. The book of Amos teaches that justice and compassion flow together like living water. Amos spoke to a people who were comfortable, but had forgotten to see the suffering of others. He reminded them, gently, firmly, that closeness with God is shown not only in worship, but in how we love those around us. He spoke of justice rolling down like waters, and righteousness like a flowing stream. This is not a rushing river of judgment, but a clear, refreshing current of kindness, fairness, and mercy. It invites us to soften toward one another, to notice, to care, to offer gentleness in a world that can feel hurried and sharp. Your compassion is a river that refreshes the earth around you. Each small kindness you offer is a drop of living water. Fact 85. The book of Obadiah teaches that God sees every hidden hurt and restores balance with tenderness. Obadiah is a short and quiet book, only a whisper among the pages of Scripture, yet its message is steady and assuring. It speaks to those moments when someone has been treated unfairly, when kindness was not returned, when trust was broken, or when harm felt ignored. God does not overlook these wounds. He does not brush them aside. Obadiah reminds us that God sees with clarity. Every burden held in silence, every tear others never noticed, every ache the heart learned to carry quietly. God responds not with harshness, but with restoration, healing, and gentle justice that sets things right in His time, with His wisdom. You do not have to fix everything. You are allowed to rest, knowing God holds each story with care. Fact 86. The book of Jonah teaches that compassion is larger than our preferences or expectations. Jonah did not understand why God wanted to show mercy to people who seemed undeserving. He wrestled with this, honestly, deeply. But God revealed something beautiful. His love reaches everywhere. There is no heart too distant, no soul too complicated, no life outside the gentle possibility of grace. Jonah's story is not about disobedience. It is about learning how wide love truly is. The kind of love that keeps calling us back when we run, when we hide, when we don't know how to get it right. The love that says, "Return, and I will receive you with kindness." This love is holding you even now, patiently, quietly, completely. Fact 87. The book of Micah reminds us that God is closer than we imagine. Micah lived in a time of uncertainty and shifting ground. Yet he spoke with simple clarity, not of complicated rituals or unreachable expectations, but of closeness. He said that God will shepherd His people like a gentle caretaker of the flock, gathering the lambs in His arms, carrying them close to His heart. This is the image of God in the night. Not distant, not stern, but tender and near. God is not somewhere far beyond the stars. He is beside you, as near as breath, as close as your heartbeat, quietly surrounding you with care. You can relax into that presence now. You are safe. You are held. You are beloved. Fact 88. The book of Nahum reminds us that God is a refuge in days of trouble. Nahum spoke into a world that felt uncertain, where powerful forces seemed overwhelming, and fear lingered like a storm on the horizon. Yet his message was not one of dread, but of shelter. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knows those who take refuge in him. This refuge is not frantic escape. It is a quiet place of rest, like being held in gentle arms while the storm passes outside. Your difficulties do not frighten God. Your worries do not overwhelm him. He is not far away. He is a safe place, a calm within your very breath. You can lean into that safety now. You are protected. You are known. You are not alone. Fact 89. The book of Habakkuk teaches us how to wait with hope. Habakkuk looked at the world and did not understand what he saw. He asked God questions, real ones, hard ones, and God did not refuse him. He encouraged him to watch, to wait, to trust that beautiful things are sometimes slow. Habakkuk came to say something quiet and powerful. Even if the fig tree does not blossom, even if the harvest is delayed, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. This is not forced positivity. It is resting in the truth that love holds us even when outcomes are uncertain. Hope is not loud. It is a warm ember glowing steadily in the night, enough to see by, enough to rest beside. Let that ember glow now, small but steady within you. Fact 90. The book of Zephaniah reveals a God who sings over his beloved. One of the softest verses in all Scripture says, "He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing." Imagine that. The one who shaped galaxies leans close to your heart and sings a lullaby of love. Not judging, not demanding, just loving you into peace. This is the love that quiets worry, softens fear, and brings rest that reaches the deepest parts of you. You do not need to earn this love. It is simply yours. Always. Let yourself be held by that song tonight. A song without words, soft as breath, steady as the stars. Fact 91. The book of Haggai reminds us to make room for God's presence in our lives. After returning from exile, the people were busy rebuilding their homes, their work, their routines. Life had become full, so full that the temple, the place of meeting with God, remained unfinished. Haggai spoke softly, not with anger, but with a loving invitation. Consider your ways. He reminded them that peace begins when the heart makes room for God, not in grand gestures, but in simple openness. We too cultivate sacred space through quiet moments of stillness, a breath offered in trust, a whisper of gratitude, a gentle turning of our attention to the one who is near. You are already making space for God right now by resting in his presence. Fact 92. The book of Zechariah teaches that God delights in small beginnings. The temple rebuild felt slow, fragile, ordinary. People wondered if it mattered, if the small, simple efforts were enough. Zechariah brought a message of encouragement, soft as candlelight. Do not despise the day of small beginnings. Every sunrise begins in faint light. Every mighty tree begins as a seed. Every journey begins with one small, quiet step. God does not rush growth. He shapes it gently, in rhythms of grace and patience. Whatever is slowly mending in your life, whatever is unfolding, healing, becoming, is held by his gentle timing. You are allowed to grow slowly, slow, is sacred. Fact 93. The book of Malachi reminds us that God's love does not change. Malachi's words fall like a warm blanket over hearts uncertain or weary. I, the Lord, do not change. Human love can shift with emotion, circumstances, seasons. But God's love is steady as the mountain that does not move, as the sea that returns again and again to the shore, as breath that comes without being asked. When you feel uncertain, His love remains. When you feel tired, His love remains. When you do not know how to pray, how to speak, or how to hope, His love remains. This love surrounds you tonight like soft light, like calm night air, like the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. You are safe in love that does not fade. Fact 94. The story of creation teaches that God brings order and beauty out of formlessness. Before the world had shape, there was only stillness, formless, quiet, waiting. And into that silence, God spoke. Light unfolded, waters separated, land rose like a gentle promise. Stars bloomed across the sky like scattered diamonds. Creation was not hurried. It was shaped with intention, with peace, with love. This story reminds us that when life feels unclear or unsettled, God is not absent. He is gently, patiently forming something beautiful, even when we cannot yet see it. Your life, too, is being formed in slow and sacred ways. Peace rises quietly, like dawn. Fact 95. Adam receiving the breath of life teaches that we are sustained by God's nearness. When God shaped Adam from the dust, He did not shout life into him. He leaned close. He breathed into him. Life began with intimacy, with closeness, with presence. This means you are not made to live distant from God. You are made to breathe in peace, to rest in love, to move gently within the warmth of His nearness. Even now, every breath you take is a reminder that God is close. Not loud, not demanding, just quietly sustaining you with love that flows like air in and out of your lungs. You can relax into that closeness. You are held in every breath. Fact 96. The Garden of Eden reveals that we were created for rest, delight, and companionship. Eden was not a place of striving. It was a place of walking with God, in the cool of the day, in peace, in trust, in love. There was no rush, no pressure, no proving, just communion, just belonging, just being loved. Though the world has changed, the longing for Eden remains in every heart. The longing for rest, for connection, for gentleness. And the promise is this: God is still leading us gently back to that peace, not through effort, but through surrender, stillness, and being present with Him just as you are now. You are allowed to rest. You were made for rest, and God delights to rest beside you. Fact 97. The story of Noah teaches that God remembers us, even in long seasons of waiting. The rain fell for many days, and the world grew quiet under wide waters. Noah waited inside the ark, listening to the rhythm of the waves, unsure of how long the journey would last. There must have been moments when the silence felt endless, when the horizon felt empty, when the heart wondered if the storm would ever stop. And then, softly, the scripture says, God remembered Noah. Not that God had ever forgotten, but that the time had come for gentle restoration. A dove returned with an olive leaf, and soon the waters drew back, revealing new earth washed clean. This story reminds us that even when waiting feels long, God is already preparing renewal. Your waiting is not wasted. You are remembered always, held always, loved always. Fact 98. The story of Abraham teaches that faith begins with listening to God's quiet call. Abraham was called to journey to a land he had never seen. There were no maps, no explanations, only a whisper of promise carried on the wind. He stepped forward not because he knew the destination, but because he trusted the one who walked with him. Faith does not require certainty. It simply asks for openness, a willingness to take one gentle step at a time. Abraham's story teaches us that God leads us slowly, kindly, according to our pace and breath. You do not need to know everything at once. Just rest in the truth that God is guiding you with tenderness and care. Every quiet yes you offer Him is an act of holy courage. Fact 99. The story of Sarah teaches that laughter can be born even from long sorrow. Sarah waited many years for a promise that seemed impossible. Her heart had carried hope and heartbreak and silence. When the angels told her she would have a child, she laughed, not from joy, but from disbelief. And yet, God turned that laughter of doubt into laughter of wonder. The child was named Isaac, which means he laughs. This story reminds us that God can bring joy out of places we thought were finished. He can surprise the weary heart with new beginnings, new hope, new light. Even if you cannot see how healing will come, God is already shaping joy beyond your imagination. Fact 100. The story of Joseph teaches that God can turn sorrow into blessing. Joseph's life carried both sorrow and beauty. He was cherished by his father, yet betrayed by his brothers. Sold into slavery, yet lifted into leadership. Thrown into prison, yet raised to a place of honor and wisdom. There were years when he could not see how any of it would make sense. Years of waiting, wondering, holding hope quietly. But in time, Joseph looked into the eyes of those who had harmed him and spoke one of the gentlest truths ever recorded. You meant this for harm, but God meant it for good. His heart was not bitter. It was tender, softened by mercy, filled with understanding. Joseph's story reminds us that even what hurts can become part of something healing. Even what breaks can open the heart to compassion. Even what seems lost can be transformed into something life-giving and full of grace. Nothing in your story is wasted. God is shaping beauty from every chapter. You have walked through the vast landscape of the Old Testament tonight, through gardens and deserts, kingdoms and quiet fields, temples and songs, tears and joy, questions and promises. You have traveled beside prophets and children, shepherds and kings, the wandering, the waiting, the hopeful, the brave. And through every story, one truth has flowed like a warm, steady river. God has always been near. Near in creation, near in wilderness, near in exile, near in prayer, near in joy, near in sorrow, near in every breath of the human heart. And just as He was near to them, He is near to you now. So let your thoughts loosen, let your muscles soften, let your breathing slow, like tide returning to shore. You do not need to hold anything anymore. You do not need to solve anything tonight. You do not need to be strong. You only need to rest. And rest is holy. Rest is worship. Rest is peace. As you lie here, wrapped in quiet, feel the presence of God like warm light around you. Not demanding, not distant, but gentle, steady, loving. You have walked beside ancient faith, and now that same faith surrounds you like a soft blanket in the dark. So close your eyes. Let sleep come like a slow, tender wave. You are safe. You are loved. You are held. May the hand of God rest softly over your heart. May angels watch nearby in silence. May peace guard your dreams until morning comes softly. And may grace be the first light to greet you when you wake. Amen.